Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 44 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. This is episode 6 of season 3. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and not as usual, but filling in for today is Joe Meade over from the In a Nutshell podcast. Tonight we're going to go over some upsets, preview of Feast Week, a couple of the recap of the Feast Week tournaments that have already happened, and then our picks for who will win some of these big tournaments. Joe, we're throwing this in at the beginning just because it needs to be talked about. There's a lot of upsets that happened in the last couple days, and we obviously each situation is different. We really had 4 big ones. Bryant upsetting FAU yesterday. The Owls were, and UNC Greensboro upset Arkansas, and then just a couple minutes ago, Jackson State upset Missouri. So, anything to add on any of these? And we talked about it last year. Some people looking ahead to the Christmas holiday. Maybe some people looking ahead to where they're headed over the Thanksgiving break.
Yeah, definitely a interesting couple of days for a lot of the power conferences. I think it's pretty easy to say that the Big Ten is probably in the worst position of all of them so far. Again, it's pretty early to start projecting toward the third Sunday in March, but I can tell you that for people who listen to our In a Nutshell podcast, the fact the Big Ten's best win is still, as of Sunday, November 19th, is still Michigan beating St. John's last Monday. That's definitely a bad sign. And the reason I add on to that is because Michigan, as Sean mentioned, was upset by Long Beach State. And it didn't really end there, Sean. Not that this was an upset, but Villanova beating Maryland pretty handily. I think they won 57-40. I think the score was a lot worse than that. So definitely not a lot to be excited about if you're a Big Ten-centric person like myself. We're going to get into more of these tournaments, but that's really my thoughts on all of those.
Yeah, I think the connection was bad there for a second, but it's telling me that it's better. So hopefully it stays like that for now. It should be good. But we got Arkansas and Michigan going to Atlantis, and we have FAU going to the ESPN Events Invitational, which is just up the road for them in Orlando. So maybe, looking ahead a little bit to that, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. Arkansas seems to have one of these every year. They did lose to Hofstra last year, I believe, and then obviously turned it up late. I would not call the season a failure yet for any of these teams, but Long Beach State and UNC Greensboro are not terrible teams. They're definitely in the low 100s. Bryant, a little bit worse than that, should be in the high 100s. And then Jackson State, that's a bad loss for Missouri. That is one that, if you're putting them around the 8 or 9 line, that's one that could drag them down to 11 or even out of the field, unfortunately for them. 2 of the main MTEs that have already happened, I was very impressed with the quality of games in both of them, to be honest. We'll start with the Myrtle Beach Invitational. Not a whole lot of power conference teams here, but as much as mid-majors go, this is about as good as it gets, especially the teams that came in first and second. Liberty won the whole thing. They won their regular season conference last year, and they lost to the 2 seed in the championship game. It happens. They did beat Villanova in the NIT. They seem to be really good this year. And then Vermont, America East, they're the best team in that division. They've been in the NCAA tournament, I think, 12 of the last 17 years or something like that. But did you catch any of the Myrtle Beach, and what are your thoughts on it?
I think overall for the Myrtle Beach, Sean, I'm really looking big picture. I know some of our other pundits on here like to just stay in the present, but looking toward the future, Liberty and Vermont being first and second, they look like, pretty early on teams that could, I don't know, lose 2 or 3 games the whole year, maybe not win their conference tournament, which means, Sean, there's even more
terrible for the bubble. But if a Charleston had lost, they could have won. They could have been in last year, and FAU certainly would have been in without their bid. But these are as good as it gets. Wyoming leaves 2-1, pretty good after losing their first game. Furman we saw beat Virginia last year. They're supposed to be good again. And Vermont and Liberty are going to be tough if they end up in the 12, 11, 13 seed line. We're going to go to the Charleston Classic, which is actually not over yet. The championship game between Houston and Dayton is going on now. But, Joe, I know we both watched a lot about St. John's. I think they definitely have a lot to worry about. They did get smoked by your Michigan Wolverines a couple days ago, but at the end of the day, they leave South Carolina with 2 wins. And I don't think that's... I think that you can call that a success for St. John's considering where they're at right now.
Yeah, I think it's a huge success, especially based on how they won their 2 games. The first game against North Texas. North Texas is a team that gives plenty of high major teams. I mean, look no further than 2 years ago against Purdue. A lot of fit. Utah.
All right, we are back, fellas. Sorry for the delay. Hopefully, the Wi-Fi issues are fixed. It looks like they are, but Joe, we were talking about St. John's. They don't play great defensively. They do leave Charleston with 2 wins though, and especially today in the third place game, they looked as good as they have all year.
Yeah, Sean, I think it's probably the byproduct. We're going to see this with a lot of teams around the country. We certainly saw it last year. Just these transfer guys getting used to each other, and then you have a system as complex as the Petito press and his offense demands a lot of ball movement. I believe his main philosophy is that he wants to tire out his opponent with constant movement offensively and constant pressure defensively. So a lot of these guys like Chris Ledlum, Jordan Dingle. They came from the Ivy League, so they were really good players there, leading scorer, player of the year. But they did not play really defense at all there. So having to constantly pressure and then, have the same amount of energy on offense has not been easy for them. With that said, though, Sean, I think their first game against North Texas, which we talked about before we got cut off, you saw a big offensive struggle. I think that was more so to North Texas' style of play. Um, Day two against Dayton had a really good first half, but the second half they just fell apart. The best offense, I mean, the best defense they don't really have is their offense because they could score and then set the press. But even when they did, Dayton broke it pretty easily. Today against Utah, much better offensively, which kind of gave them some momentum defensively. Not saying it's at all fixed, but you finally saw Jordan Dingle and Jenkins, who's consistently been a great player for Petito, both at Iona and St. John's. Really step into it. Joel Soriano, just the constant enforcer and force down low. So I'm actually really impressed with St. John's. I know they went 2-1, but I think they have a lot to build off. They have some easier games coming up. They play Holy Cross on Saturday. Though they did beat Georgetown, I expect St. John's to not have too much trouble. And then they have a test next Friday, I believe, at West Virginia, so December 1st. So Big East overall looking pretty good, but Sean, I'm gonna let you get more into it.
Yeah, it's just we everyone's heard about how deep their rotation's going to be all year. They have transfers, and they even let Quinn Slazinski go to West Virginia in the summer because they had too many players. Yet they did go 10 deep today, but only 6 players played 10 minutes. Naheem Aline came off the bench and played for 17 minutes, but Conway and Wilcher and Traore and Ejiofor, these guys are supposed to be contributors for them, and they don't really play. Then you have a couple other guys who haven't seen the floor yet, Cruz Davis and RJ Luis is injured. But, I mean, how are all these pieces going to fit? Like, if you're really going to press the whole game and try and play as fast as possible with 5 players, I don't think that's going to work. So Rick's got to find the rotation. It stinks that championship game is not over yet because I thought both teams have looked really good so far, but we're going to have to talk about that another day. Utah comes in 4th place. They do look pretty good offensively. They space the floor. They should have some success in the Pac-12, but I think a tournament bid is going to be tough for them with only 1 win here. LSU, should be better than last year. They were the worst team in the SEC last year. They do leave, 4th place is 1 and 2, and 5th place is 2 and 1, which I think you'd rather be 5th than 4th in these things. And LSU really should have won all 3 games. They had Dayton on the ropes by 14, I think, in the second half. They give that one away late, but then they win the next 2. So Matt McMinn turning things around a little bit there in Baton Rouge. And then the only other thing that I think we should talk about here, Joe, is North Texas in 7th. They do leave 1 and 2 with their only win over Towson. They're in the American Conference now, North Texas. They come over from the Conference USA, and they've been as good as any mid-major has the last couple years. I guess you can call them a high major now, but it is going to be tough for them to get an at-large bid with only 1 win in this tournament.
Yeah, I think the theme we talked about prior to our cutoff was mid majors doing well. This was a tournament. If you even count Dayton as one, I really don't. I just think they're consistently up there. This was one tournament where that was not the case, Sean. And I think North Texas, there is some positive things to build off. I mean, they should have beaten St. John's. St. John's needed a last-second basket, and then North Texas really had a terrible possession out of on their last shot. So I don't think it's all negative for them, but certainly they're not going to chalk it up as anything less than they missed a few good opportunities to get at least one resume boosting win.
So the next tournament we'll talk about is the Baha Mar Bahamas Classic. Miami takes the win. And Joe, I wrote down in our notes here, they are the Iowa of the ACC, ninth in offensive efficiency and 100th in defense. They have a couple different players from a year ago, but they are going to be very similar to last year's team, which was really good and was one of the best in the ACC. They torched Kansas State today, 12 of 24 from behind the arc. Nigel Pack is still there. Poplar is still there. O'Meara is still there. Coach Jim Larinaga gets another W in the Bahamas there.
Yeah, Sean, it's kind of funny. I don't know if you mentioned that you thought, I know you've said it at times, that they're the Iowa basketball of the ACC. Um, I I'm really interested in how they're going to evolve throughout this year. Certainly bring back a lot from that Final Four team they had, but if you're an Iowa fan or maybe a team, think of other teams that play exactly like this, where you have great offense and not great defense. Not great's actually pretty light. Bad defense. Like what's the difference between these teams? Clearly, Miami's more talented than in Iowa, but is their defensive efficiency? It's not that they're a little better. Is it just they make the plays when they have to, or is it that they could get back in space? Like, what do you really think it is,
I think
Sean?
it's that they don't have to, and that's why they're better. If you score 50 points a half, you need like four good defensive plays to be leading, and they're a little interesting. They basically just try and guard you, and then if you get in a good position, they kind of just let you score. Like if you get a post man down low, they're not going to double and send you in rotations or anything like that. But that's kind of the play style of the ACC, to score a lot of points, get up and down, and have two or three really good runs in the game, and that's how you're going to win. They did lose Isaiah Wong from last year, but he's a great player, but they're going to be as good as they were last year. Kansas State gets second. They do win the war with Providence that included a pretty bad brawl, but the defense didn't show up against Miami. But Joe, did you catch any of that Providence game? Because that was as close as it gets.
But not only was it as close as it gets, it wasn't just a war, there were two wars involved. Uh, I think those are both teams that, and Miami could be included in this, traditionally staples in March. I know Providence, they had the Sweet 16 in 21, 22, but last year, Miami and Kansas State I think they were pretty much the sweethearts of the tournament, like the ones that were in it the furthest. Uh, all that said, a lot of emotion from these teams early. I think they believe that they're something special, which, uh, of all the basketball I've watched this year, Sean, and I expected it out of Michigan State, I haven't gotten it yet. These teams probably play with the most fire and passion so far, and I understand that's not really a metric that's measured by Ken Palm or Torvik or any of the other websites our viewers pay attention to. I mean, I think it's a really good thing. I think there's a true belief in these teams they can go far. Shaw, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it means a lot when you can play that hard in a ballroom with a couple hundred people watching. It is essentially the same thing as the Battle for Atlantis. It's just at a different resort in Nassau, and 4 teams instead of 8 teams. Like they have these huge ballrooms. They bring bleachers in, and a couple hundred fans maybe are there, and it's more of like a high school event. But if you can get energy for that game, you can find it anywhere, and that will not be an issue for those 3 teams really, because all of them should play with a lot of just Miami zips it around real quick. They have a lot of energy on the offensive end, and the other 2 on the defensive end. The other team there, Joe, Georgia, not great showing from them. They are not going to be very good this year. Year 2 for Mike White, it might be a long season for them. So let's
John,
go. Here, go ahead real quick.
I'll be quick. Is this too early to put Mike White on the hot seat?
I think so. Yeah, it's only year 2 for him, and he came up from Florida, so he knows the conference a little bit. I guess he didn't do very well in Florida. He wasn't fired from Florida, but I think they were pleased that he asked. They may have told him like, hey, you might want to look for another job, and just never got around to firing him. But yeah, they didn't do much last year, and it's an incredibly tough job. Even with a couple NBA players, Tom Crean couldn't really get over the hump of maybe in an IT team, but it's going to be a tough year because that conference is pretty good this year. We're going to go up to Madison Square Garden, Joe, for the Empire Classic. We're halfway through that. UConn knocked off my Indiana Hoosiers today. Indiana hung around for quite a bit of this one, but UConn pulled away late and made it a pretty ugly storyline. I don't think we really need to talk about UConn much here. They're pretty good. Their freshman, Stephon Castle, is out for an extended period of time. He will be a miss. He's a good player, but UConn didn't really miss a beat without him. But the story comes back to Indiana. They've just had 14 threes in the 4 games that they've played. Offensively, they need to do something different.
Yeah, Sean, I think the two blue bloods of the Big Ten, Indiana and Michigan State, have the exact same main problem, which is their 3-point shooting, which is I don't want to say it's like even bad because we're so early on, and I assume those teams will figure it out with Michigan State, especially, who we'll talk about later. Sean, what do you really think's going on with their offense? Do you think it's just a bunch of new pieces and they're just not in rhythm?
I think it's a little bit of everything. 77 points against a team like that, offense in Connecticut, and a lot of soft foul calls and that many free throws. That's not bad. They were just under a 100 defensive rating offensively, defensively, which is pretty good. But they were just a little bit worse than that offensively. They don't run enough plays for threes. That's what the issue is. The only threes that they get are out of kicks or dump post feeds and then feeding it around. But it is not really working. Indiana's 2-point defense is really good, which it was the reason why those other teams shot so many threes. I don't think the defense will be an issue. They've had something wrong, something go bad defensively each game, and it's been something different. So I think they can figure that out. It's going to come down to the offense. I mean, last year Woodson said we're playing this way because we've got two NBA players, and we're going to get them the ball as much as we can. But I mean, you don't have any NBA players. I mean, maybe one, but Kel'el Ware, who's been the best player on the team so far, did not play very well today against Donovan Clingan. So Indiana's got a chance to beat Louisville tomorrow, but we should spend more time on that game, Joe, because this game didn't really surprise me. I did say I think it was going to be 20, and Indiana they hung around, they played hard, but they get out-rebounded by a lot, and they don't score enough points to hang around, and that's just going to happen when you play a decent offense, no matter how many stops you get. But, Joe, the other game, Texas, Max Abmas takes away a pretty signature win there from Louisville. And as everyone predicted, it'll be Texas and UConn tomorrow. But what an effort from Louisville.
Yeah, I thought they were pretty much dead to rights, not only with the bad preseason loss they had, but the bad regular season loss. I don't know really how to give Louisville a lot of credit. I think, clearly they were trying. Teams try in every game, but I think it's more Texas playing down to that level of competition, which for them is not great. Especially, and normally it's not, like, the grand scheme of things, not a huge deal, but when you are playing the defending national champions, who did not have not shown any weaknesses so far, to be quite honest with you, it does not bode well. And beating Louisville at Madison Square Garden is definitely a cool experience. Whether that'll be a quad one win or not, 1-50, I don't know what they really gained from this. What do you think, Sean?
No, it won't be. They want to. They want to play UConn, and they'll get a chance at it. And, Texas, they really just didn't play good enough defense in the pick and roll. And that's not really something that has been an issue for Texas before. So I'm leaning towards no. They should be fine. But I think they got lucky to win this game. They hit a contested 2 from a small guard. And I think you don't make that shot a lot more times than you do. But it went in. And it counts for, if they had won by 50, they still get to go against the Huskies tomorrow. And that will be at 7 o'clock on ESPNU after the third place game, which is at 4:30. It's a little odd, but I guess they want to get in before the football. That's everything that's happened already, Joe. We're going to go into our MTE predictions. These are the big ones, and the biggest one, maybe ever, starts tomorrow in Hawaii. It is the Maui Invitational. It'll be at the Stan Sheriff Center in Honolulu because of the fires. But, Joe, to take us through this one, this is going to be an epic tournament.
John, in terms of blue bloods, currently good teams, whoever planned this tournament, I don't know, this is planned, what, a year and a half in advance? I mean, great forecasting, seriously. And I'm not even trying to be over, melodramatic here. I'm just going to read off the teams. Tennessee, Syracuse, Purdue, Gonzaga, Kansas, Chaminade as always, and UCLA, Marquette. That's a mix of blue bloods and teams that are up and coming, like Marquette. I'm sorry, Marquette, you're not a blue blood. You are a constant staple in college basketball of late. But, then Gonzaga, Syracuse, oof. And you get regionally, too. You get Midwest, South, Northeast. And, I think there will not be a lot of work done among college basketball fans starting at 2 p.m. Eastern time. I'll leave it at that, but I'm not going to try to get anyone in trouble with their bosses.
And there's going to be a team that will probably make the NCAA tournament that will leave 1 and 2. And that's... And that win, if that wins against Chaminade, then that doesn't mean anything because they're a Division II team, so that actually doesn't even count on your run sheet come tournament time. But this is really cool. I think there are 3 national championship contenders here. But Joe, who do you think will win this tournament? And we'll alternate the order too for the other ones.
John, I'm going to go with Kansas, and it's not that I think they're necessarily the best team or the best playing team right now. I think they have the most favorable bracket. There's no way in heck, and I really could have used another 4-letter word there, that they will lose to Chaminade. And I think with that said, they'll be able to be pretty well rested. And I think UCLA and Marquette are going to get into a war. That seems like a game that's going to be really close. A lot of contrasting styles in that game. I think the matchup between Smart and Cronin, who've got against each other, I think a few times, not many. Actually, I don't know. But that said, definitely coaches not used to each other and not used to playing against that kind of style of basketball. So I think that'll be a really interesting game. So I think Kansas wins the semifinal, and then whoever they play in the final, Hunter Dickinson, I'll put it this way, against Purdue, he's played really well at times. If he does end up playing them, and Tennessee, he's also had success against. So I think I'm going to roll with the Jayhawks, Sean.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Tennessee, Joe. Actually, I misspoke earlier. I think there's 4 national championship contenders here, and I really hope that they all win their first round games so we can see them battle it out against each other, because the third place game is going to mean a lot. Somebody leaves 2-1 with a win against a top 10 team. You'd take third place in this tournament now, I would think. I'm going to go Tennessee. They've looked really good so far. They've kind of blown everyone out that they've really faced. Dalton Connect is looking like the best transfer in the country. I'm going to go with Tennessee, but that is Purdue Gonzaga. Gonzaga is probably the 5th best team in this tournament, and they're a really good team. So Maui will be cool. Those games are on some weird channels. I don't think any of them are on ESPN, so just watch out for that. Check out the U and ESPN2 and stuff like that. Joe, we're going down to the Bahamas again for the Battle for Atlantis. This starts on Wednesday. Maui's Monday through Wednesday, by the way, and Atlantis is Wednesday through Friday. First off, we got Northern Iowa and North Carolina, Texas Tech and Villanova, Memphis and Michigan, and Stanford and Arkansas. So not a super elite field like Maui, but it's still a field with a bunch of tournament teams.
Yeah, Sean, just real quick before I get into it, how many tournament teams of those 8 or potential tournament teams do you see? I could guesstimate about 5 to 6.
I mean, all of them have a shot, really. Northern Iowa they always do have a mid-major there. Sometimes they've thrown the A10 team in that slot, but Northern Iowa is certainly capable of winning their conference. And then other than that, probably Stanford is the only one that I would have out of the field right now, which is a good sign for your teams there because you get some opportunities early on for some quality wins. Yeah, but at least 6.
Yeah, that's a really good thing. I think of all the teams, Like Arkansas, I know we touched on them losing to Greensboro. They don't really need to, especially the SEC this year. They don't really need a steal to win, but I hate being Big Ten centric, but that's naturally what I am. This is a golden opportunity for Michigan. They'll probably have two games that are going to count as quad one, even if they lose to Memphis. I assume they beat Stanford, and then the fifth place game could be a really good opportunity to get a quad one win. But looking at it so far, Sean, and we didn't really touch on it with Purdue in Maui. If you're a fan of the Big Ten, you need to start cheering for all these Big Ten
Yep.
teams. I know we kind of
Like right now, this is
lightly,
it. If they have a bad
yeah,
MTE week, we could look at a 4-team field or 14
yeah,
bit 4 big
it,
league. Sorry.
yeah, it could be 2017, 2018 all over again when there were four teams that got in. And this isn't me being cute, me trying to ramp up views. It's really bad at this point. So definitely cheer for Purdue and Michigan. Even if you're a Michigan State or Ohio State fan, I don't know what to tell you. Don't think of it as cheering for us. Think of it as cheering for the conference, so you could beat us later, and
Think
it makes
of
it
think of it
better
as
even
cheering for
more.
yourself because when you beat them later, it'll look better.
Yeah, exactly. With all that said, Sean, this tournament is probably the hardest one to predict. It's probably harder than Maui because Maui, I could put a decent argument behind anything, especially with the talent of the teams there. I'm gonna have to go with this is such a cop out answer. I'm gonna go with the surprise team. I'll go with the winner of Memphis, Michigan, because um, that's simply just going based on everything. Has to do with the gut feeling and teams that get hot. I think Memphis is a team. I saw them play Missouri. Could really go on runs and really a momentum based team where if they're playing well, especially in a three game and 3 day set, that could catch fire. So I'll go whoever wins that 5 o'clock game on Wednesday. That's such a cop out answer. It's a lame answer. I'll be hit up saying I'm weighing, but that's my answer. Sean, what about
Yeah,
you?
unlike Maui, every team has I wouldn't say serious flaw, but like a solid flaw about them, and we'll see how hard it is to exploit that on 3 games in 3 days. You do have your first opponent, and you will be able to practice for that, but some of these games are less than 24-hour turnarounds. Like how is Michigan going to prepare for Arkansas if they face off in the next day? You know, there's a huge skill behind that because you can't do too much. You can't really you can focus on yourself and your team and what you want to do, but you really can't prepare as much as really any other game. And you say conference tournaments are the only other times you play 3 times in 3 days, but you've seen those teams before all year or maybe even twice. So it's not the same thing as that because this is early on in the year in a different country in front of a couple hundred people. There will be more than a couple hundred people at your conference tournament, most likely. But I'm going to go with Arkansas to win. I was pretty high on them early on the year. I do think that Greensboro loss might have, woken them up a little bit. But North Carolina is pretty good. Villanova looked good. Texas Tech, Grant McCaslin's their coach. He was at North Texas the last 7 or so years. And Memphis is picked to win the American, which has a league of FAU and North Texas in it. So there will be another team, 1 and 2, from Atlantis that's a pretty good team. So you've got Michigan or Memphis. I've got Arkansas. We got 2.5 more here. We're going to go to Orlando for the ESPN Events Invitational. This field is probably not as good as they were hoping, but you got Penn State and Texas A&M, a NCAA tournament rematch. FAU and Butler, Iowa State and VCU, and Boise State and Virginia Tech. These start Thursday, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's Thursday, Friday, Sunday there. But what are your thoughts on the Orlando field here?
I think it's kind of top heavy on both sides. What I mean is the first game in each of the sets is probably the better matchup. Though, like FAU Butler those are two quality teams. Clearly, FAU and Butler. I'm not going to hold losing at the breastplate against them. But when I look at Penn State, Texas A&M, I have a hard time thinking Penn State will win that game. I think Texas A&M they proved a lot to me. Winning even in Columbus early in the year is really good, and especially the way Ohio State's offense can't operate, and they really limited them. Iowa State VCU, that's probably the best first round game you'll see in this tournament. Two teams that are really good, like both uh, I think it's interesting. VCU, their first year head coach. I wonder how that'll go. Overall, though, if I have to pick someone, I'm just gonna go with the devil I know, and that's gonna be Texas A&M. I think they're playing better than most teams in the country. They just seem consistent, and there's not a huge flaw with them. So that's normally a good thing for these tournaments. So I'll pick the Aggies.
This is going to be a huge defensive tournament, just all around. Like Texas A&M, really good defensively. FAU, awesome defensively. Iowa State, elite defensively. Like, Virginia Tech has been good at times under Mike Young defensively. So it'll be interesting to see how teams deal with that. Again, with limited to no preparation, really. I'm going to go with FAU. I did pick them for something else before they lost to Bryant, unfortunately. But I think they're better than Butler, and I really hope they get to face Texas A&M because that is probably two, top 20 teams in the country. And, you would think FAU would have some fans there 'cause it's not too far away. And then another thing to look out for is a potential Penn State versus VCU matchup. That would be Mike Rhodes going up against his former team. Not entirely sure it it it's likely to happen. It would be the third day either way, so they would have to win and lose on the same day. But another thing, Texas A&M did play in this in 2019, and they did go 0-3 with a third day loss to my Fairfield Stags. They're in quite a different place right now. Buzz Williams, that was year one for him, and they were one of the worst teams in the Power 5. And now they're looking at an SEC title. So how things can change in just 4 years. The last MTE here we're going to talk about is the San Diego Invitational. It starts on Thursday and Friday. We've got Oklahoma, Iowa, USC, and Seton Hall. Joe, a sneaky good field here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams in this field with a lot to prove, and not even a lot to prove. I think a lot of questions to answer. USC did lose to UC Irvine, I believe, and they're in a slugfest with Brown, only up four. So I'm following it on the other computer here. So certainly a very talented team. Seton Hall, year two under Shaheed Holloway. I think it'd be really good for them to. They weren't really all that close to making the tournament last year, so I think it'd be good for them to show little improvement this year. 4-0 so far, as is Oklahoma under Porter Moser. With all that said, Sean, I'm gonna actually go with Oklahoma to win this tournament. I've been low on Iowa. It's not even Iowa hate. I just the way Oklahoma's been scoring the ball, they're 5-0 against no major competition, but Iowa doesn't play well against teams for the first time that have great offenses. And that's just a statistic and a fact that's known around Big Ten country, certainly around close followers of college basketball. So uh, I think Oklahoma is due for a good season. I really like Porter Moser, and I feel like they'll win the first game and continue the momentum to whoever they play, whether that's Seton Hall, USC, which I think is actually going to be a really good game.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Seton Hall to win it all. I think USC are potentially really fraudulent. They have two really good players in Collier and Boogie Ellis, but it's something about them that they just don't play as well as a team as they probably should with the talent that they have. And obviously, Bronny is not quite around yet. I don't know if there's an official timeline on him. I think maybe Christmas, New Year, but I do like Seton Hall to win that. I do think their guards can really get into USC's good players and they can defend. And then I agree with you totally on Porter Moser. If you give this is the first matchup too. If you give him a week to carve up Iowa, I think he could carve anybody up, and sometimes Iowa carves themselves up. So I think Oklahoma, if they bring it a little bit defensively, I think they'll win, which is hard because Iowa are awesome. So last thing here, Joe, we're just at 45 minutes, so perfect timing. We've got the Acrisure Invitational in Palm Springs, California on Thanksgiving. That is Arizona versus Michigan State. I do think that game is outside, which is a little odd. Maybe some wind factor, maybe shooting the ball will be more difficult. We definitely saw that last year with Michigan State on the aircraft carrier. But, Joe, this is going to be Michigan State's looking a little better here recently, and Arizona won at Duke. So this is going to be a good game.
Yeah, I think it'll be a phenomenal game, Sean. I would hope for Michigan State's sake, they did blow out Alcorn today. Again, no one cares.
They made some threes, though. which is
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Doesn't
I think
matter
it's
who that's against.
yeah, I think it's lining up well for them to put on a performance. I'm gonna shy away from picking them to win, only because they haven't put a complete game together yet, and that's really unfair because I think they've had three actual games. Like I think James Madison is a pretty good team.
Oh yeah,
Um,
they still haven't lost yet, by the way.
yeah, yeah, and Duke is Duke, and I think on Friday they pieced together against Butler. They really didn't let them get back in the game. Once they got to a 5, 7 point deficit, Michigan State would just keep extending it. So, with all that said, Sean, I'm gonna pick Arizona to win a extremely close game. I really hope for the Big Ten's sake that Michigan State does win this game. Uh, you can't have Michigan beating St. John's be the conference's best win in what week? Probably week 3 of the season now,
Well,
Sean. That's not,
4 or 5 games for each team.
yeah, yeah, and certainly, I hate to do this right now, Sean, but Purdue's going to be ranked in the top 10 most of the year at worst. You need them to win 2 games in Maui. If they lose to Gonzaga, I highly doubt they would drop one to Syracuse. But just I don't know. This is this isn't just a Big Ten message for all the conferences around there. It has no effect on your conference standings, so cheer for your conference. I understand not doing it in March because you hate if you're a UConn fan, you hate Providence and vice versa. But for now, your enemy's your friend, so cheer for them.
Yeah, and according to the every number that you see, and it's supposed to be the case in the committee room, these games mean as much as any game. And these are great opportunities to get quad one wins against out-of-conference opponents. And even if they don't appear to be very good now, if they go on to have a great season and you beat them now, it counts for as if you beat a good team at the end of the year. So we'll wrap it up with that. A lot of basketball to be watched. Some of it might not be great, again, because of the 3 and 3 days or 3 and 4 days or something. But these games do mean a lot at the end of the day, and it is great as a fan because no matter what time it is, really from 11 to 2 a.m. with Maui, there will be basketball on. So we'll leave you with that. Not sure when we'll see you next. Joe and I will be on for a nutshell this week. And hopefully Chuck and I will be on to recap some of the action because I'm not sure we can wait till the end of these MTEs to talk about it again because there'll be too much to talk about. But